What's up, YouTube? Today we'll be making some Liquid IMO. That's Liquid Indigenous Microorganisms, also known as LIMO for short. And I'm not talking about the stretch limousines. This is a natural farming inoculant tea. It's a compost tea. Today I'm going to stick to that recipe in Korean natural farming. I'm not going to vary much from the recipe. I'll talk about how you can tailor this to more of a grow stage, a vegetative stage, or a transition or flowering stage, a fruiting stage as well. So some of the products that I'll be using are the KNF inputs. I do make these products and sell them off of my website, roguenaturalfarming.com. I'm not in the business of trying to be a mega fertilizer salesman, but I do like to help the community. I like to supplement, and on all of my labels, what I say is make your own first, supplement second. So if I can help assist you, then I would love to do that. If I have any available, these are all seasonal ferments that I make small batch with a lot of love and all the best ingredients that I can find and source around me. So check out the website for more information on those, and I'll talk about all these individual inputs here. To make LIMO tea, we need a reservoir first. I'm using a pickle barrel today. This is your standard pickle barrel. It's 55 gallons. However, I only filled it up to about that height right there. So we can leave room for the bubbles. We can leave room to hang our bag and steep our tea brewer bag from the top. So we don't want to fill that so that it's overflowing. We want to leave a little bit of gap right here. So let's just call that 50 gallons that we're using for this brew today. The other thing we need is an air pump. This is an aerated tea. We are culturing aerobic microorganisms, and we're using an inoculant here that we created. This is a Korean natural farming inoculant, IMO. You could use IMO 3, IMO 4. In this case, I'm using leaf mold IMO. A few videos ago, I did a video demonstrating how to culture leaf mold IMO. So check out that video in case you haven't seen it, and you're gonna need that first to make this brew. And essentially what we're doing is we've cultured the indigenous microorganisms from around the ecosystem here. All the oldest growth trees I could find, I cultured that on grain substrate. Now we're gonna take those microbes, we're gonna do another generation in a liquid aerated tea. So this is a way we can take this inoculant and we can multiply that again in this tea. And then we can easily apply that tea either through fertigation systems, which in the end of this video, I'll show you a commercial application I did in Humboldt County on a much larger scale than this, where I was directly injecting bioactive teas into a drip system for a commercial cannabis farm. You could also spray that through a foliar spray. So this tea is really good to use in the phytosphere on plants and also soaking in the ground. It's good for prepping beds right before planting. I usually apply this a few times a year, usually springtime and then fall, and we're in the fall right now. So I'm doing some prepping. I put down a lot of compost and a lot of mulch, and this is a great inoculant tea to help to start breaking down all the compost. This is going to really help drive that living soil nutrient cycling process. So these teas are amazing to make. And later I'll demonstrate some other compost teas, but this is really specific to Korean natural farming. And on that note, I want to give a shout and a tip of the hat to Master Han-Kyu Cho, who developed the Korean natural farming way through his ferments and extracts. And the most foundational part of Korean natural farming is certainly the indigenous microorganisms. So Master Han-Kyu Cho, thank you. You'll need a pump to aerate this tea. I'm using a 1200 gallons per hour pump. You can see the size. I'll put a link in the description below on where you can find this. I wouldn't use anything smaller than this for 50 gallons. This will get the right amount of bubbles, and what we're trying to do is agitate that tea bag that we're steeping in here. We really want to get it moving around in the solution. We want to get the microbes extracted from the grains into this compost tea. Okay, so it's really important that you have enough bubbles that it's agitating. You don't want it overflowing, obviously, but you don't want just a cute little bubble, like a fish tank, bubble coming up. That's not really going to make the best tea. Yeah, you could say that's aerobic, it's aerated, but you really need to agitate that bag. So I'm not going to tell you exactly what that ratio is. It's more just kind of looking at it like, okay, you're getting a rolling boil and that bag is moving around. You're like, okay, that's good. So I'll show you what that looks like here in a minute. All right, so let's talk about our Korean natural farming inputs that we have here. And there's really the basic recipe is your brown rice vinegar. This is a culture that I make myself of brown rice vinegar with the mother. It's a living culture brown rice vinegar. I make this from scratch. It's a 3-step fermentation process, not an easy fermentation there. Brown rice vinegar will help to neutralize our pH and give us a nice buffering of our tea here. The fermented plant juice of nasturtium is our food source. This has the sugars and all of those constituents that we extracted through osmotic pressure using dry sugar. We extracted those from plants into this liquid form. And so this is our sugar source. This has fructose and other available forms of sugars that our microbes can easily eat and multiply. So this will be the food source for our compost tea. OHN is Oriental Herbal Nutrient, a tincture and extract of ginger, garlic, angelica, licorice, and cinnamon. So this is an amazing formula of herbs that help the circulatory system. I mean, it's good for people too. In fact, I've heard this is a traditional Chinese medicinal recipe that is actually used for people before it was ever applied to plants. I certainly use it myself for health as well, but it helps with the circulatory system of plants, the cinnamon, and all of these great herbs. It also buffers the microorganisms and will take care of some of those pathogens in the brew. So this is a great addition, classic Korean natural farming input here. Those three will be used in what's called a maintenance solution. This is your basic formula in Korean natural farming, along with your sea salt, which is a trace mineral complex. When diluted down in water, all of the ion bonds break down into available trace minerals. So this is something that a lot of different farmers are kind of blown away when they hear that I'm adding sea salt to my brews and using sea salt in different extracts and feeds that I make. They're like, are you crazy? Like, we're trying to leach out salts around here on the coast. Why are you adding salts? Well, in your situation, if you have too much salt in your soil, then perhaps I wouldn't be adding any more. But again, and that dilution will again break apart those ion bonds and create trace minerals that are available to your plants. They're also a food source for the microorganisms. So along with the simple sugars we're using from fermented plant juice, we're also using this trace mineral extract from our sea salt. So these four constitute our maintenance solution in Korean natural farming. So if you can source these four along with your IMO inoculant, then you have the makings for the traditional LIMO, Liquid IMO tea. Okay, so let me talk about a few additions that you can add here. Based on the cycle that you're in, the growth cycle, the transition cycle, the flower cycle, the fruiting cycle, you can add a few more inputs here. So one of those would be calcium. This is extracted from eggshells. It's vinegar and eggshells. So I wouldn't add that to the brew while it's brewing. I wouldn't really add any of these next additions that I'm talking about in the brew. Only the first four that I talked about. So next we have CalPhos. This is extracted from bones. That's calcium phosphate. Again, there's no need to really add this into your brew. It's not really a food source for the microorganisms, but we could add it on the back end when we're done brewing, and say we're in a transition state, which actually right now, this would be nice to add for me. It's September here. A lot of the plants and fruits are actually in a transition state and starting to put on fruit. So CalPhos is a great addition for that transition right after veg. You're going right into flowering. The CalPhos is what you want to use. Calcium is more for hardening the fruit flavor and for hardening of the fruits, the texture and flavor. So this is really good in the fruiting stage. It's also good if you've had rains and you've had some atmospheric nitrogen that has been soaked in due to rains, or a heavy feeding with too much nitrogen, you get a vertical growth. You can balance that out afterwards with some calcium, which is more that lateral strength. Last but not least, fish amino acids. I really can't say enough good things about FAA fish amino acids. It's far better than fish emulsion or fish hydrolysate. And I'm sure I'm going to get some comments about that. Like, sure it is. This is whole fish that's been fermented for 3 years. And I do have another pickle barrel full of this that is available for anybody that wants to get some of this. Like I said, this is a whole fish that's been fermented down, bones, gristle, everything, the flesh, the meat, all of it, literally whole fish fermented over the course of 3 years. So that's how I know this is a far better product than fish hydrolysate or fish emulsion. Fish emulsion is only a fraction of some of those omegas that you would find in this whole fish product. Fish hydrolysate, as the name implies, is basically fish that's been thrown in a washing machine. They might do a short fermentation on that, lacto ferment, and then put it in a washing machine and wash off all of that fish into water. So it's watered down, it's diluted, and again, you're not getting all of the constituents of the fish. Literally, this has the calcium, the CalPhos, the nitrogen, the omegas, everything locked up in that fish. So high nitrogen. I definitely wouldn't add this to the whole brewing process. I've done it before, and it did really alter the cultures that I was getting. So with the IMO, this is a fungal dominant culture, by the way. If you're growing brassicas, things like that like a little more bacterial culture, maybe you want to not apply this IMO tea. However, the way I see it, the fungi is also helping to break down the organic matter in the soil. So you can still apply this. I still apply this to my broccoli, my kale, my bok choy, but that's up to you. So be thinking fungal foods when you're culturing with IMO 3-4 or leaf mold IMO. There's a couple more inputs that I make that I didn't have bottles of currently. One of them is potassium, which is used at the later stages for all you growers. You know, you use the K, the potassium, towards the later stages in a plant's growth cycle, that flowering, fruiting stage. So that can also be added into a compost tea. Again, I wouldn't add that into your brew. I would add it after your brew is done, before you apply. And then our fermented fruit juice. Fermented fruit juice can be substituted with the fermented plant juice. The fermented plant juice has those enzymes and hormones like gibberellic acid and such that are more of your more vegetative cycle style compost tea. This fermented fruit juice that I make will be a substitute for the fermented plant juice. If we're in a flower and fruiting stage, we can use this instead. And then last but not least, this is not part of the Korean natural farming canon, so to speak, and recipe, but humic acid is a fungal food. You can also use worm castings or the leachates from your worm bins. I love adding that to this mix instead of humic acid. I only have this granular humic acid, but I'm going to add in some of that as well in this brew. So first things first, I'm going to get my leaf mold IMO into my brew bag here. These are handy brew bags. These in particular were made by TeaLab, Mr. Luke Besner from Humboldt County. Great guy, great company. So they have my full endorsement. I'm not getting any kickbacks currently. So anyways, we're going to fill this bag with our leaf mold IMO. And you don't have to be exact. There's really no exact proportion for this. In fact, when you're scaling up, you use less. But what I'm gonna go for is more of a mass. So I'm looking to do like just shy of like an American football mass right here, right? Got to be careful which football I talk about. I know international community and the rest of the world talks about in different size football. So anyways, this is an American football. I'm an American. So that's about close to the size of a football, a little less. That's all right though. Actually, I'm gonna do, yeah, just a little more here. There we go. Don't breathe that stuff. Fungal spores are not good even if they're beneficial for the soil. So I have about an American football size mass. And what you want to do with these tea bags is fold them over 3 times. If you can go 4, even do 4. 1, 2, 3. We'll go 4 because we can. Then you snap them together. It's really important that you fold this over enough times that this doesn't release all of your grains into the mix. Otherwise, that makes your application really hard. I'm going to use a sump pump to spray this out when it's done. And you can really clog up your sump pumps, and it's a lot of problems, especially if you have fertigation systems. You don't want, the more you can filter this out up front, then the less pre-filters and other things you need to have in your lines down the run, if you know what I'm saying. Anyways, obviously that's for more bigger application, more commercial application, more, advanced systems, hydroponics, and your fertigation systems. So we want to take a piece of bamboo or a stick or whatever we can just put across the top. This has a handy dandy little carabiner on it, so I can put it all the way down in, and then I'll just put this across the top. So this is now submerged, and it's really the perfect height, this bag, where it drops it down kind of right in the middle. So it's really perfect for the agitation and just getting it equalized right in the middle of your compost tea. Let's get the pump rocking, and I'm gonna add the rest of the ingredients here. temperature is a very big part of these brews, fermentation and culturing microorganisms. Anytime you have hotter temperatures, the process goes a lot quicker. So you can see we have some foam forming. It's not always a sign of culturing microbes, but it is a good sign, and oftentimes it is a sign. But what I'm saying is, just because you see bubbles and foam doesn't necessarily mean you're always culturing microorganisms. In this case, I would say we are. We can always scope this under a microscope to see what we're culturing. But things are looking good, as they should. Here with the Liquid IMO tea, we're 30 hours into the brew. Let's take a look in here. We got some nice foam that has formed. So nice and biologically active. We're ready to apply. So I have a trusty sump pump here. This is a 1/2 horsepower sump pump connected to a hose. This is what I'm going to use to distribute, pump all my biologically active tea out of here. So we can dilute this down about 30 times with fresh water, dechlorinated of course. What I like to do is just put a water feed in here while I'm applying, so I'll get my sump pump going while I have another source of water filling this up simultaneously, so it's constantly diluting as I'm applying. So I'm not super worried about exactly a certain ratio, but I'm distributing the biology in here out, and it doesn't have to be super specific. All right, so the sump pump is rolling. I have a water feed in here, so that'll be diluting as I'm applying. So we'll use this fogger unit here on my hose. It's a 4 gallon per minute flow rate, just for distribution. Hopefully it doesn't clog this up. I tried to avoid debris in my compost tank here, so we'll see how it does. Have some new beds over here to inoculate and water in. I sprayed my phone. All right. Pretty good flow here. Some nice distribution. I can tell it is starting to clog up just a little bit with debris as it's slowing down here. So this is why you want to avoid any particulates in your tank. So let's check this out here. My fogger head is getting clogged up by some debris in there, so I'm just going to run it without. So that's a good example of why it's really important to just make sure you filter out and use your brew bag, and try not to get any debris in there. I did put some granular humic acid in that I tried to dissolve, and I should have just put that in my bag, but it's all right. I can just apply like this. So here's a new bed that I'm starting. Some cucumbers, some papayas that volunteered down here. I got some strawberries in here, some calendula coming up, a bunch of nitrogen fixers, cowpeas. So basically what I did is I put down some compost and mulch over that. And so this is the 3rd edition. So using the 3 M's principle here, the manure, mulch, and microbes. Give some to the pomegranate trees. We got a moringa over here. We got some bananas. Got a rack of bananas up here. Those are burro Mexican bananas. So yeah, really, I like to spray it on the plants too. Get the microbiome completely covered, above ground, below ground, as above, so below. Really contributing to the rhizosphere and the phyllosphere, both. Just really want to soak everything. So I like to emulate nature when all the deciduous trees are dropping their leaves this time of year. That's when I chop and drop. I do manure and mulching, and then I come through with the microbes and do my LIMO teas. JMS is another good one you could be doing as well, Jadon microbial solution. But you just want to get a bunch of good inoculant out there that's going to help to break everything down. Got a carambola, starfruit, coastal prickly pear, Nepales. Just planted a bunch of canna lilies. We got some Glaracidia, some moringa, cow peas, pigeon peas, a lot of nitrogen fixers in. I just put out some seed bombs. So this is also good for right after you seed bomb to really help with microbiome and establish that good living soil. So liquid IMO can be applied to any natural farming system, centropic agroforestry, permaculture designs, any natural farming. This is just a great inoculant to work along with those systems. And even though permaculture and centropic agroforestry are more process-based and not input-based, this is a inoculant that'll help kind of jumpstart those systems because they rely heavily on biomass. So nitrogen fixing plants support species, chop and drop biomass plants. But we also need the microorganisms to break that down, cycle it back into available nutrients. So that's what this is. So this tea is handy dandy for any regenerative farming system. Got my air pruner bed over here, the cherimoya. Need to do a little weeding in there. You can see a bunch of little trees though. Cherimoya starts. Spent grains make a really great addition to your compost pile.
Good morning. I'm here with the Vortex Brewer, and we're making a batch of IMO Tea LIMO to further inoculate our plants. We are in a flowering stage, so what I've done is nice ruby flow you can see. What I've done is tailored this to a flowering stage. So we used fermented fruit juices here, apple, pear, as well as the other KNF inputs, OHN, sea salt, and brown rice vinegar, as well as some bags of some IMO3 that I collected here on the land. And I just want to show you the system that we're using to essentially feed and inoculate our beds with. So this tank is hooked up to a Netafin filter here. This is a 100 micron filter. This works really well for IMO teas. And we can just inject right into our drip system. Get our pump going here. And here we can see our emitters. These are emitters that are made in Israel, and they have a nice jet stream, so they don't clog easily at all. They shoot this jet stream up and have a little cup on top, and it puts off about a 12 to 14 inch radius. So really, between the Netafin filter and these drip emitters, you can apply these compost teas really well without clogging.